Welcome, Nicola. Thank you so much for joining me for People Behind the PhD. It's a pleasure to have you on this episode, I suppose, if we were calling it that.
Probably, yeah.
It's great. So, I think my main objective of what I want to do is really figure out the people behind the PhDs here at CRT and AI. So, how about you start by telling us about yourself and what you're doing with the center?
Right. So I'm a first year PhD. I'm actually almost done my first year now. And I'm working specifically in explainable AI and looking at currently at least some medical applications of explainable AI and trying to tailor make explainability methods for medical applications that actually take into account the type of data we're working with rather than just being generically applied to a model.
Wow, God, that's very interesting. So, within the medical sphere is kind of where you're focusing on.
Yes.
Is what it seems like. Okay, and where did you get your kind of drive for that? I feel like for me, the medical field is so expansive and stuff. I don't have much of a biology background, so I feel like jumping into that from an AI point of view must be kind of challenging, right?
Oh yeah, no, it was definitely really tough in the beginning, but I'm really lucky that I get to work with Tyndall National Institute, who are
Mm,
actually here in Cork as well, who are
right.
providing all the domain knowledge. So whenever I have any stupid questions where I'm like, I don't understand how this works, please help me, they're always there to kind of offer support, and they've been really, really great to just kind of provide any kind of factors that should be considered when I'm doing my research and when I'm designing my algorithms.
That's really fantastic. That's a great service to have. I feel like I think many PhDs or researchers would love to have kind of an interface with someone that or some
Yeah.
group that has good, domain specific knowledge and stuff. That's really great. My next question is kind of how did you find AI as kind of a topic that you wanted to kind of, I suppose, focus your research on? What made you pick AI as a kind of research area, I suppose, is what I'm asking.
Right. So my way to AI was actually kind of weird because my undergraduate was in psychology
Oh
and I
yes, you were saying this
really liked
actually, yeah.
psychology. So I actually majored in statistics and methodology, and I really liked the
Mm,
math aspect of all of it. And then I ended up taking a programming class at one of my electives my final year, and I really, really like programming. So I ended up actually choosing data science for my master's program. And during my data science master's, I then took a deep learning class, which I just thought was incredible.
mm.
And from there on, I then went on to apply for the PhD. Actually, first ended up doing my master's with my current PhD supervisor, wrote my master thesis with him, and then ended up taking the PhD position here because I enjoyed it all so much.
That's really cool. So is the data science element of the psychology stuff, because I know psychology is actually so versed in all sorts of things to do with statistics and things. So was it that
Mm,
section that you really enjoyed and it kind of, I don't
definitely,
know,
yeah.
steered you towards the AI side of things? That's really cool. What is your kind of your main research question at the moment? What is your kind of, I suppose, your main objective, or what are you looking into and discovering or researching at the moment the most, I suppose?
So I'm actually currently at a bit of a turning point because I finished my first paper. We're actually currently in the
Wow.
process of submitting to a few different conferences. And my first paper was an application paper, so I was just deploying some different existing explainability techniques to this medical data, seeing what worked, testing out where were the pitfalls kind of deploying these explainability techniques. And now I'm currently in the process of moving on from there and actually starting to develop my own explainability technique, which is more tailor-made to the medical data. So I'm currently writing a lot of code and doing a lot of trial and error to see where there's possible mistakes and where there's possible challenges that we could address, and also just doing a lot of reading to find gaps in the research that exists at the moment.
Oh wow. So like you've done an application paper already is what you're saying, is it?
Yeah,
And now you're
yeah.
kind
I
of okay.
published yet, but we're currently in the process of reviewing it and hoping
Oh
to
wow.
maybe get it published by the summer.
That's very impressive. That's really cool. So is it your plan then to, so you've kind of done your application element, are you going to try and extend it somehow and add your own kind of, you said you're kind of going after making a tailor-made, explainable section to it. That's really interesting as well.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the problems we're having with our data that we're working with is that it's really multidimensional and multicollinear,
Mm,
which causes a lot of issues with explainability because that means explainability often from one run to another won't be the same. It'll change constantly due to the data being so
mm.
complex. So we're trying to find different ways of tackling that issue and seeing if we can just make it reliable in a
Okay.
sense. Also, because that way it'll be easier for practitioners to understand how the AI algorithm works, and it'll be easier to actually convince practitioners to use the
Right.
AI algorithm
No, yeah,
in
that's
their
very interesting
practice.
because I think I know from a bit of research I've done is that some of the issues with getting practitioners and medical people to actually adopt some of the very exciting AI models and stuff that are out there for whatever diagnostic tools or whatever it is. Some of the reasons that they don't use them or take them up is because they are kind of not convinced of the methods used for them, or they don't understand what's going on within them. So they would rather use their own traditional methods as opposed to using these new tools just because they simply don't understand them. So maybe with your kind of work, we can kind of, I don't know, manage to convince more practitioners that these technologies are actually a good thing, you know?
Oh, yeah, ultimately that would be fantastic. I'd be really happy with that. Also, with the new AI guidelines coming in from the
Mm,
European Union, we're kind of looking at more of explainability in AI anyway, because it's necessary for this entire trustworthiness, being able to audit
mm.
models. So all in all, it's an area that's really, really, it's changing a lot right now, and it's really interesting.
So in terms of like the technologies that you're using, are you using kind of a neural network approach? Are you using traditional AI? What are your kind of approaches?
So for my initial application paper, I used a lot of neural networks,
Okay.
and it was actually really interesting because initially my entire contribution was just going to be like explainability for neural networks. That was
Mm.
my kind of idea for the PhD. But we kind of ran into a wall in the sense that our more basic machine learning models, like random forests, were outperforming our neural
All
networks.
right. That's very interesting.
So we didn't have much of a justification anymore to actually deploy the neural networks, because why would you deploy something so
Mm.
complex and use a much simpler model? So now I'm actually looking at some explainability techniques for more traditional models like random forests, like decision trees, and just seeing how they can be adapted to my data type.
Oh, that's very interesting. Okay. So I suppose with the traditional methods and stuff like random forest or decision trees and things, if they are outperforming, like you're saying, the neural networks
Yeah.
that you've looked into, okay, maybe yeah, it's worth trying to get those other traditional models like random forest and stuff and explain them for those situations. So
Yeah.
that's very interesting. And do you think you'll ever try and expand on the neural network side of things again, or have you parked
Well, I
that?
mean, I would definitely like to, just because I think
Mm,
it's incredibly interesting and I really like working with deep learning models, because it's also what initially sparked my interest in AI.
sure, yeah.
But I will need a good justification for it before I actually start with it again.
Fair enough. It's a lot of work, I think, isn't it? The neural network
Yeah,
stuff. It's
definitely. And they're very hungry as well, and so hard to get data in the medical domain
yes,
that makes it very
absolutely.
difficult as well.
And trying to actually deploy or run your experiments is very difficult. You need serious GPU farms, or you need to have access to very intensive computational power to do some of these things. I have that challenge
Oh,
myself as well. It's just it's crazy difficult. If you have all the money in the world, I feel like you could look into some really interesting things. So there's a lot of discussion at the moment around artificial general intelligence, and I've looked into some articles about people that believe that we have artificial general intelligence coming quite soon, or some people say it's within the next decade or so. And there's also a small-ish minority of people that say that it's never going to happen, it's not possible, or anything like that. So I'm curious to see. Just I think it's an interesting point or an interesting question to ask. Do you think that we are going towards artificial general intelligence, or would you have a different opinion on it, or maybe it's not something you've thought about much or anything like that, but do you have much of an opinion on it?
well, I actually argued with my housemate about this a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah.
so it's funny to bring it up. I think it's definitely naive to say it's not going to happen, just
Mm,
because we thought ChatGPT and large language models weren't going to happen until a year ago, and they came,
mm,
within months, and they were just incredibly high functioning. So I think it's definitely going to happen. And with the kind of onset of quantum computing, we have no idea what's actually going to be possible.
true.
So I'm not going to put a time frame on it, but I'd say it's definitely possible. It's just
So
a matter of when.
watch this space is what you're saying. You think at some point this is going to take off. I think that's very
Yeah.
interesting about the quantum computing thing too. If that technology expands enough or develops enough, how will that impact artificial intelligence is really, really, really interesting, I think.
It's so hard to judge right now. There's really few, you can't make a decision on it right now.
True. I think it's almost fantastical at the moment in a sense because again, we're not there yet, but people are it's easy to kind of look at the way, okay, again, with ChatGPT, we had that surge in popularity and surge of usage for ChatGPT. And it's something that we would never have thought would have been possible until it actually started happening. I don't know, it's a tool that we've all become so dependent on, I feel like, over the last year or so. So I think, yeah, maybe quantum computing could be a way that it could come around. I'm very interested in that point, I think. Thanks so much to Nicola for joining us for People Behind the PhD. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to sharing the experiences of other students with the CRT and AI.